Michael, your career encompasses roles at companies like Vanta, known for its innovative approach to security compliance, or Security Scorecard, which is a leader in cybersecurity ratings. How does customer success landscape differ in a security-focused environment compared to more traditional sectors?
Yeah, customer success at its root is all about helping the customer reach whatever goal or objective they have. And I found because I've been in CS roles and customer facing roles for a while with different industries, the cybersecurity and the IT kind of operations and security spaces are definitely a little bit different. One thing that comes to mind, speed and urgency, right? Sometimes you're dealing with software products that when the project gets done, the project gets done. In the cybersecurity space, there really isn't that luxury of time sometimes. You really need to have your products and all the guidance your customer success teams give post-sales to really help the customer both stay organized and ultimately keep their organization safe. That's the rule at the end of the day, or that's the objective at the end of the day. I think that one of the unique parts about it is in the cybersecurity space, we're trying to prove a negative, right? Prove that something bad didn't happen, which is a little unique. Most other products, especially most SaaS products, there's some very tangible goal. I can prove that you did X things or Y things. In our case, we're trying to prove the negative of this bad thing didn't happen to you, or because you took these steps, you secured your organization. So a lot of times we have to help the customer find that proxy or that placeholder for what good means out of it or what success means out of it, because they didn't end up on the front page. They didn't get hacked. They didn't have their customer data all over the web somewhere. How do you prove the negative? So that's the one wrinkle I've always found in CS, in customer success, specifically in the security space.
I think there's also the connection, proving the negative is also in customer success. Like you didn't lose that customer didn't churn. So whenever you said prove the negative, prove something that didn't happen, I made the connection with customer success.
Yeah, no, I can see that. That's a good correlation. Although I always look at it as, at least in customer success, I can prove what we did retain, what we did win, and even what we expanded on. There's a very clear denominator in a lot of the formulas and KPIs we use in customer success. Unlike maybe in like the sales world, how do you prove you didn't win or you did win all the prospects you had out there, right? What's that universe of known prospects you could go after? I tease my sales colleagues sometimes of their win rates. We had this win rate. I'm like, yeah, but I had a much bigger win rate because I had all those customers somewhat captive. I know what my denominator is.
Your first role as a CS dates almost a decade ago. Reflecting on this period, what did it change and what did it remain the same in customer success?
Yeah. I was going to say, yeah, you're dating me now. It's actually probably almost a full decade now. I do often joke that I've been doing customer success my whole career. I just didn't know it. So I've spent 20 years all in post-sales, B2B roles, customer facing, customer engaging, helping the customer get the most out of the product. None of that's changed, even though now products and business models have changed along the way. Let's see, thinking back 10 years ago, I guess a decade ago, we weren't as SaaS centric maybe as we were. There was still a lot of legacy solutions there. There were still a lot of companies building that on-premise solution or that hosted solution. And really the software providers at the time were still very much in control. What was your journey? What was your outcome going to be like? I think in the last decade, we've really seen the customer start to take control, both from what do they want to get out of the software, what their goals and objectives are, and both tailoring their software engagement and lifecycle experience, if you will, to what they need to get to their objective, whatever that goal is. And usually the software is just a vehicle to do it. Whereas back then, the software was a much bigger initiative of what they were trying to do. So that's where I see that it's evolved.
And because indeed it evolved, can you call some of the, let's call them upgrades, in terms of processes or even a different approach in customer success? Because I guess it's a different, you have a different approach when you are talking or when you are doing customer success for a software which is on premise versus which is something which is on a SaaS business model with monthly subscriptions. There's a different approach now.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of, and I firmly believe that the difference these days is we're much more tighter and aligned with the customer's journey, right? Really thinking from the customer's viewpoint, the customer's point of view, because customers today, they're not going to tolerate some really bad disjointed experience where they have to go one part of the app to do something, maybe go manually out to do something else, then come back somewhere else to do something. They want that to flow smoothly. They need that to be efficient because at the end of the day, they have a day job of whatever their business or organization is doing. Their job doesn't have to be, I'm going to navigate all the bad things in your software. So I see the customer journeys become much more important, much more of a driver of what both the customer has to do and what CS needs to do to guide them and help facilitate that customer having a good experience with your product. I do think we've gotten as an industry a lot better just on data, right? The literal telemetry coming back out of the product, especially as we've moved to cloud-based SaaS solutions. We now have access to all of that data. We can be data-driven. We can tell where the customer has gone. There's lots of products out there that will let us look to see what the customer is doing, how they're engaging with our products, just so that both we and even the customer can work smarter. And I think for us in CS, that helps us target better, either with advice, either with a solution, either with specific guidance. Hey, customer, we notice you're stuck doing X, right? And I think that probably the other big thing I'd say we've had to change our approaches in is to really tailor the right model solution for the right type of customer, right? I'm really talking about segmenting your customers. One size of customer success does not fit everybody. How do you give the right type of experience to whether it's a small customer, whether it's a mid-sized customer, whether it's a big, large enterprise customer? You can't apply the same solution to all of those, right? And I think that's really where we're now getting better at knowing the journey, maybe even knowing the journey is different for each segment, and then using data to target it better so we can be better and the customer has a better experience.
How did you used to do customer success in the past without having the proper tools and proper data?
We had to do a lot of customer engagements and workshops, right? I think we probably relied heavier on the customer-facing teams, customer success, maybe even support, education services, whoever else was touching the customer, even sales, to say, how do I get feedback in as to where those problems are? And that could be both reverse engineering support tickets that come in to say, oh, I had this problem, where do I see patterns? All the way through literally as we're sitting with them, how do we harvest the ideas of what we're running into? I got to admit, I've always sometimes cheated and tried to find folks that were familiar with either the domain or even my products to turn them into customer success people, because they really knew what should be happening from the user's perspective. And I'll admit, I've had that view my entire career. Part of it is thinking of Thanksgiving here, right? Coming up in the US as a holiday, we get together with family. And at one point in my career, my mom was a user of the software products I had for my company. And if I had a bad user experience that was in there, I would hear about it at the holiday dining room table. I always find you need to be able to think that way. And I think we're getting better at using data to be able to do that at scale, but there is still nothing that stops from really getting really good product sessions to understand what the user is up against and how you can help make them literally into a hero in their organization with our products.
What are some key challenges that have been successfully addressed over the past decade, and which one persists despite the evolution of the field?
Ooh, good question. Let's see. So I would say successes is probably just the mere fact that we talk about customer success now, right? It's not a whim. It's actually a real thing. It's a discipline. It's not sales. It's not support. It's not professional services. It's really a function unique up to its own. And again, I admit I'm a little biased. I think there's elements of all of those skills in there that merge in to be a good customer success person. But I do remember literally before I had a customer success title, I forget what title we had. It was a post-sales delivery type title, and was at a conference. And specifically, I remember it was Lincoln Murphy on stage one of the founders of the CS movement, talking about customer success. And I was furiously taking pictures of every slide on screen, texting them back to the crew going, look, I know what we do now. I know what our name should be. And that's really how I made the leap into having a formal customer success title. Didn't change what we were doing, but I do think that now we recognize it's a discipline. There's more science than art to it at times. So I think that's where we're continuing to evolve, maybe not as mature as some of the other disciplines in SaaS, but definitely maturing along the way there. Things that persist was the other half of your question. What are we still stuck with? I still think we all still struggle with how do we get the right expectations up front with the customer? Set the stage, set the expectations. All too often, this is something I bemoan about with lots of other CS leaders, is part of our day job as CS people is resetting expectations with the customer. So that means somewhere we're still failing to set up front. What is the experience they're going to go through? Maybe we don't have that journey defined well, so we can communicate that to the customer and really get them bought into what they're going to have to do, what we're going to have to do to be successful.
When setting up the right, because I want to deep dive into setting up the proper expectations, and I want to ask you, how do you really understand what the customer wants and what are his objectives when they decide to enter into the journey with the company you represent?
Hopefully we've got really good collaboration with our sales and pre-sales teams, right? I think the key to doing that. But I think the real answer to your question is probably good discovery, right? Knowing, for us as a software provider, in my case, being really comfortable with what our use case is, what's the spaces we fit or don't fit, what can the product do or not do, listening heavily with the customer and asking lots of good discovery questions. I'm a big fan of was it 5 or 6 whys, right? Keep asking why, and then at some point you flip and you start asking how. That's very much a consultative approach. As long as we're doing that up front to really uncover what's the motivation for this customer, it makes the whole rest of the customer life cycle easy, because now we have a mutually agreed to point that the customer and we as a software provider want to get to. If we can anchor everything to that, gives both sides a lot of power. The customer's got motivation to get to their goal and their objective. And we as a CS team, or even as a whole software team, we can right size the product, define the elements that they need out of our solution set to use. Maybe they need help with partners or other services, but we can put together the solution that's going to get them there as quickly and efficiently as possible without having anyone, waste time or get stuck along the way. And I think I still see that sometimes as a fear with customers of how do I get to that first literally time to value part of it? And I do believe if you can do that good discovery up front, really clarify that everyone agrees, yep, here's what we want to go do, then it's pretty easy for us to recommend, here's the plan that you should go with, here's the steps you should take to get there, and here's your milestones you want to check off along the way.
Speaking about skills and and you also need and speaking about skills and the right people, I want to zoom in into the team structure.
Okay.
You set a bit the stage. I know that you are now a VP of Customer Success at Vanta. How is your team organized in terms of roles and reporting lines? Who do you report to?
Okay, so we're set up literally within the sales organization. So the whole go-to-market, we're part of the go-to-market team. I personally report up to our CRO, Stevie Case. But I also need to cross-functionally work with everybody. That's part of the thing of being in customer success, right? If you think of any good software company that wants to go fast and grow, I always say it's like a race car, right? And for that car to work well, all the gears in the engine need to mesh up well. If they don't, the company's not going to go fast. Now, I'll admit I'm biased. I'm a customer success person. So to me, customer success is the biggest gear in the engine, but we touch all the other ones, right? We've got to touch product. We've got to touch marketing. We've got to touch pre-sales, legal, right? There's really an unlimited amount of everyone we touch in addition to the customer. Our world is to try and make sure that meshes together well, despite whatever the solid or dotted reporting lines are. My team specifically, we're broken out by both segment and geography. So we have different touch levels, I guess you'll call it, with our customers. Smaller customers, they get a little more structured or standardized of a CS delivery service versus maybe a more customized one, more high touch one for our largest customers. So that's how we're organized today. And ultimately, again, cross-functionally, it still all boils down to how do we as a customer success team end up getting the right solution, the right expert, the right problem solver for whatever that problem is at the right time for the customer.
And in the former companies that you used to work, was there a different setup?
Gosh, yeah. So I've been at a few different places as a CS leader. And actually, yeah, there's probably different models now I think of it at all of them throughout my career, but there's definitely some themes through them, right? My prior place also heavily in security, it was security scorecard where we did security ratings for the industry. We were also aligned by segments, by touch model. There were a few other pieces. I'm trying to think. Let's see. When I was at Tanium, we were much more of a building CS for the first time. So we had to go through all of the forming, storming, norming type of roles of team growth. And especially because we were designed at first, our first priority was customer success for very high touch enterprise customers. So we had to build that out. And we had a matrix that tied us into all the different, both technical and other business and support groups that we would engage with within the company. And then as the customer base shifted a bit, we would shift different teams and groups towards more of a maybe not super high touch white glove model, but a more mid touch or depending right size touch for customers as we grew and covered more and more customers with that CS team. And back the first place, I got a customer success title when I was with Pythia, and that was a little bit of a unique space. We were actually in a monthly subscription model, which puts a whole different type of pressure on you. But it's not as difficult as it sounds. It was a lot more like your mobile plan. We would keep renewing you unless you said stop, right? But our teams there were organized much differently, more around technical capability, what types of products and technology you were using in your organization, so that we could mix and match, again, the right subject matter experts, the right industry experts for the products and services and solutions that you needed from us. But yeah, each one was a little bit different, but all the themes were still around what does the customer need? How do we line up the customer need and goals that they're going for with what we can provide? And as I would say in all of those roles, the customer success team, in my mind, always served as that guide that I use with my teams a lot, the analogy of a Sherpa, right? One of those climbers out in the Himalayas, they're the guide with the image of the pack with 20,000 pounds of stuff on their back, it seems, carrying you and guiding you up the mountain. That's what we sometimes need to do in customer success, right? We're lugging the product, we're lugging your goals, we're lugging training materials, we're lugging other enablement materials, and we're guiding you on that path to get to whatever that pinnacle or goal you have is. To me, those are always the themes. We may just tailor it for the industry and the space you're in.
Do you, whenever you are joining a new team as a CS leader,
Mhm.
do you come up with a predefined playbook, or do you tweak the setup based on what you get into the organization?
The short answer is I always tweak or customize any playbook for whatever the organization and, more importantly, their marketplace needs, their customer needs. I have a bunch of standards that I like. Like I have favorite dashboards that I bring along usually and say, oh, okay, team, here's what I need. Here are the metrics we need to follow. Here's the North Star pieces, because to me, they're proven, they're familiar. I know how to get those to work. I know what levers I need to push on those. But the actual techniques, again, high level techniques, 20,000 foot, they're probably all the same. But when you're down at the 1,000-foot view in the weeds, trying to actually implement a task, you're certainly going to tailor it by what both the product, the industry, and the domain need, just because that's what's needed to make that product successful with people.
Speaking about KPIs, what are your team KPIs, and what are the individual KPIs that you are reporting to your executives on a regular basis?
Uh, retention, right? That's always been the name of the game in customer success in my mind. But seriously, specifically, let's see, for lagging indicators, we use the infamous gross retention and net retention. How many gross dollars did we save? How many net dollars did we grow that same customer base over a same period? So those are the ones we primarily focus on. That's the lagging indicator, the end result. The downside is you can't wait until that renewal transaction to actually measure everything. So you need some leading indicators. Customer health to me is the biggest one. How do you find whatever telemetry and data that give you that indicator early on that the customer is off track? Either my favorite ones now are ones that tell me when a customer is off the customer journey. And what I mean by that is if you think the customer journey as a GPS map, as soon as the little blue dot for the customer is off the roadway or path they're supposed to be on, and we have to start recalculating our mental GPS here, how do I flag that early enough so that I could tell the customer's off, they're an exception, they need help? That's where we prioritize. And then there's a lot of other leading indicators that I'll usually like to mix in with customer health. Engagement. Are they engaged in working with us? Are they advocates for us? That to me is almost the pinnacle of customer success feedback. And then some of the more tactical ones of, are they using the product? Are they using the more advanced, mature features in the product, which tell me they're really adopting it versus just using it? And then I'm very data driven. So I love to have the ability to slice and dice all of that by either customer segment or product line or stage in the journey, some way where you can narrow down or triangulate down to that one cohort of customers that's causing you the most pain. And that's where you can then lean in.
You mentioned dashboards. You
Yep.
mentioned having a set of favorite reports. Can you name a few a few reports and dashboards that you like to carry on in every organization that you are going?
Yeah, I think my favorite is a good solid forecasting dashboard that breaks me down, give me what's the amount, a number of logos, an amount we're going to renew at the beginning of or during this period. Where did those renewals stand? Somewhere between we're still talking to them to we won it or we lost it with churn. Give me the same thing for expansions. Tell me where things are. And then that's the biggest one to make sure that you're forecasting on a good, accurate basis. I rely on that heavily to really drill back down into how are we doing as far as end results are concerned. Other dashboards are really then taking all that other telemetry data along the way to say, how can I intercept customers well before that renewal transaction to be able to pull things back? And it's funny you mentioned the dashboard part, because I've had a couple of conversations with other CS leaders over the last few weeks. And where everyone seems to be having that problem right now is I do really good at the onboarding part up front, month 1, 2, 3. It's that middle cycle of like month 4 to 9 where maybe we get lost a little bit, or maybe we don't know exactly where the customer is, or maybe the CSMs get busy on renewals or on onboarding or some other crisis of the day, and they lose track of the customer there. And that's where we all seem to be focusing on how do we make sure that we don't get lost in that middle period of their subscription.
And what are the KPIs that you need to measure just to make sure that you don't miss the 80% of the work, 60% of the journey? If you consider 20% onboarding, 20% at the end, okay, you still remain with, let's assume 60%, or most of the thing happens between onboarding and the renewal. What do you track in between just to make sure that you get a successful renewal at the end?
I've always found it's important in the customer lifecycle or in the customer journey, identify what those milestones are in those, actually in the whole journey, but especially in those middle months, because then you can tell how far the customer is moving along. Are they making progress? Have they moved significantly month over month? For us, Vanta, we help customers right now in being able to automate their security and compliance needs. How do I get to create my achieve a SOC 2 audit report, or maybe an ISO certification or one of the privacy certifications? So for us, one of our key metrics is we look at how far are you progressing along that journey. There's a number of tests and tasks that you need to do to get to that audit. How far have you gotten along with those? And we even joke now that we're looking to steal ideas out of the commercial space, because there's a lot of other things that we think of, like I think of either my utility company or my car. Why? Because every month they send me an email, and my electric company is great for it. It sends me an email. It tells me, Michael, here's the amount of electricity you used this month. Here's how much your neighbors used. Oh my goodness, you're horrible. You are burning up electricity 5 times more than your neighbors. They're giving me some comparison, but also giving me then usually in that, when I look at it through a customer success person's lens, right? Of, wow, this is really a value-based ROI report telling me my monthly usage, giving me recommendations of how I can be better and more efficient at saving energy along the way, and maybe other programs they have. Okay, that's upsells. It's really giving that communication back and looking at it from that standpoint. Ultimately, we're looking at that data. And I think the real key is how you turn it around and leverage that with your customers so they see the same data.
I want to ask you, what do you think it makes the difference between building a great CS team and a good one?
I think it's definitely building a great team requires you looking at both the skills of the people, soft skills, domain skills. There's times when we're hiring today at Vanta, we're looking at candidates. There's no perfect candidate out there that has both deep CS experience, domain industry experience, and experience in your product, right? So I often say 2 out of 3 ain't bad. There's a song that has that title somewhere, because chances of us finding all 3 will be searching forever. Let's focus heavily on soft skills. Can they be a good customer success person? Talk to customers, engage with customers, get the credibility and trust of customers. Do they have enough expertise around a bit of the domain so they can talk the localized language, if you will, of what the problems are in that space and understand them with solutions? And then we can teach them how to use the product. That's the more easier skill to build together. And some of those soft skills, I think trump everything else. I always look for really strong active listening skills amongst the team. Can you listen, engage, really understand the customer's problem out of it? Do they also then take really the view of the customer, thinking of things from that customer's vantage point, not our goal of I need to get the renewal, I need to get an expansion, but looking at it from what does the customer need to be successful, to be a hero within their own organization personally? And then how can you narrow down? I like CSMs that can focus on mutual goals. How do we define a mutually acceptable goal for both us, renewal, expansion, keep using the product, the customer, whatever goal they're trying to achieve, to be able to win over, to get a commitment with the customer? And that to me is critical, because if you can get that commitment to that mutual goal, we almost get, dare I say, nagging rights over the customer. And what I mean by that is I had a customer I chatted with a couple months ago, and they said, okay, while they both loved their CSM, they were scared of their CSM. And I, of course, go, okay, tell me more. That sounds odd that you love them and you're scared of them all at the same time. And they said, what this CSM particularly does is they got us to realize, here's our goal. We all agreed on it. But then they held us accountable for meeting our part of the deal, things we needed to do in the software, things we needed to do in our organization, changes we may have needed to make to our software helps automate. So there's a lot of manual processes we expect customers to do away with and rely on the software on. And that's change management. That's dealing with people. That's invoking something new. And they were scared, sometimes afraid of our CSM, because they're like, we know if we don't show up for our next call with them to report back that we did all the stuff we committed to, we're going to not feel good. We're going to be in trouble. And they don't want to be in trouble with the CSM. So it really was giving the CSM that authority. I jokingly calling it nagging rights, because when I promise my spouse that I'm going to take the trash out and I don't, she nags me, right? And that's really what we're doing as CSMs. We're making a commitment to as an expectation. We're going to both do X. We're going to get you to goal Y. And if we kept our part of the bargain, we trained you, we gave you tools, we gave you guidance, we maybe helped, with something else. If you, as the customer, don't bring your balance, you're going to feel bad. CSMs that can invoke that, I think, are the best.
We spoke about processes and strategies. We spoke about people. And now I want to close the loop and I want to speak about tools and budget.
Okay.
And I want to ask you, how crucial is choosing the right tools and technology for a CS team's success?
Oh, immensely critical, right? You can't go faster and scale without a good, I'll say both tools, tech stack, and process. And I'd really highlight the last part, because there's never going to be tools that can encompass and automate everything you want to do in the world. There will always be things that are going to rely on either, at a minimum, input from a human being or a system into that view, or some added process, because again, the customer is now going to go off. They're going to do whatever changes they're making within their organization, maybe with their end users, their customers, your customer's customer. So you need some type of tool to be able to organize that, do that at scale. I actually think the tools are also critically important for standardizing it. Very often I've come into organizations as a new CS leader, and not so much that there wasn't a tool, but there was no structure. There was no standardization. And the good part about having a tool or a system is it really helps you standardize and enforce that. Because once you've got a baseline of, okay, now instead of doing this same task 50 different ways across the 30 different CSMs that are here, we have the ability to have one baseline. Here's the way we're doing it. And then from there, now you can actually start identifying gaps and improving. Now you're improving them across the entire, set of events you're doing versus trying to treat each one off. And if you think of, like, when I think improving from a standardized piece, I think back to the bigger programs like a Six Sigma program, right? A lot of manufacturers harp on. Why is that so powerful? Because it's trying to take the standardized baseline and then raise that up with small incremental improvements over time. And I think that's something we need to adopt more, not necessarily all go get our Six Sigma certifications, but at least have a standardized process that we increment on versus trying to increment on 50 different unique, bespoke, customized processes. Because now you've got 50 things to do versus if I'm standardized, I only have one to improve on.
In my marketing playbook, you being VP of customer success, you are considered for us as marketers, the economic buyer.
Okay.
Now, I'm curious, when your team is building a case for buying a new tool for the CS team, what's important for you? What do you want to see in the business case? Because I hear a lot of CSM telling me I cannot convince my boss that I need a tool for. So, dear economic buyer, what do you want to see in the business case?
The first hurdle is convince me there's a problem. Show me that there's a clear problem, clearly defined problem or opportunity. I found a lot of times it's we need a tool, we need a tool, we need a tool. Personally, I see that sometimes as an excuse, right? There's been times in my career I've run CS in Salesforce, right? There's enough basic CRM functions, task management, note taking that you can run what you want. Maybe not efficiently, maybe not automated in all the facets you want. Maybe definitely not talking CS as a language within the solution. But define what the problem is. What are you really trying to solve there? Because that'll tell you what type of tool you really need. Is it one for more customer view, customer engagement? Is it one more for automation of I've got this same task I have to repeat 1,000 times, help me automate it? Is it do more one-to-many type of tasks that I can take a cohort of customers all with the same issue, problem, or situation and hit them with the same set of messages and follow-up tasks in an automated way? Define the problem. That's always the first piece of it. Also help then as part of the solution, the plan to go solve that problem. How does that tool really either help us overall? Is it just something that makes me go be more efficient or grow faster? Or does it introduce a new paradigm, a new way of approaching customers, a new way of engaging customers? Those are the types of things I usually look for. All too often, I see folks bringing up hey, this is going to be really cool technology, or this is something that we CSMs will love for it, but they never address what is the problem it solves. Why does this make us better?
Speaking about budget, do you ever feel like marketing and sales are getting a higher share from the overall company budget?
Okay, yeah, always.
How do you defend your stake in success?
Yeah. We're at the end of the calendar year here, so like everyone else, we're probably working on our annual budgets as well. No, I do think, and part of it I do think is the nature of our industry of as SaaS companies, and we're continually looking to keep growing, and where does that new logos bring that in? That drives more marketing spend, more marketing dollars, right? I think we are always in that battle of, as a software company or a tech company, where do you spend your capital dollars? Is it going to be on new logo growth and acquisition? Is it going to be on existing? What's the mix of that? And I've been at some orgs where that difference has been not just single digit multipliers, but multi-digit 10x differences in budget. And some of it's understandable, right? Because if you think about it, especially growth companies, startups, scale companies, growth is shiny. It's attractive, right? It's what may bring in future rounds of funding. It may bring in future larger account opportunities, right? Again, this is the CS person bias coming out in me, right? But I look at it, spending some of that money and investing in retention retention's your strength. That's where you have that recurring solid foundation of ARR year over year. So it becomes a battle versus growth versus retention. Really, to me, and I actually started my career in the finance side of the world. So I look at it as it's the how do you prioritize customer acquisition costs versus your cost of retention. The how do you get around it or over it? Part of it is having good, solid conversations of what is our goal? Is it growth? Is it retention? Is it a mix of both? What's the ratio there that we're looking for? That's one way to help direct are we putting our spend in the right, our budgets in the right categories? I also am a big fan of tying, especially the retention portion of it, the post-sales portion, to NRR, right? To how do I link the dollars we're going to spend in that budget to some type of forecast, help tell that story around what's the amount of gross retention GDR dollars that you're bringing in as a CS leader, the expansion dollars that you're driving as a leader. You'll probably, if you look at it, and as companies grow and mature, at some point, you're going to get to where those post-sales retention and expansion dollars are greater than the new logo dollars. And that helps really bring up the question, why are we investing more money in logo growth than retention maybe at this point? And that's where you can start to defend that budget accordingly.
And how do you allocate the budget? How do you allocate the CS budget? Which part goes to whom? What are your lines into the CS budget? How do you distribute it?
At first, I take off some. Most of a CS budget is likely going to be for resources for your people, and then you've got tools and other services first. I typically will take off the top. What are some of the tools, services, the things I need across all of CS? My fixed costs, if you will, if I put my accounting hat on, the things I need no matter what. And then for everything else, I like to allocate it by or correlate the allocation by segment, right? How much money am I getting maybe from, we have 4 big segments we break our customers up into. If I look at where my ARR is, where the growth is going to be coming in, how do I divvy that money up by, again, that mix of existing customers and new customers I'm going to need to take on during the year. And that's typically how we divvy stuff up.
I cannot ask this. I cannot go through this discussion with you without asking you, how is AI shaping the customer success approach, especially considering privacy and security concerns? Because you do work in a security.
And gosh, with all of the latest AI news in the last, 4 or 5 days here, right?
Exactly.
I was going to say it's been super top of mind. Actually, AI is really top of mind for us at Vanta. We'll have our user conference in a couple of weeks here in early December, and we're entirely focused, or most of the content is talking about AI, because I have to admit, that's what our customers have been talking about, and not just this week, but this whole year. It's impacting their businesses in lots of ways. I guess there's bigger security concerns, right? And especially in the security space, the question comes up of, how do I safely use AI? How do I make sure that I'm not sharing my company's trade secrets or secret sauce out there unknowingly? Because employees are going to go try and use their AI interface from somewhere to help make their jobs easier. And it's understandable, right? Because all of our roles in tech, specifically in cybersecurity, IT operations, those more technical product set fields, the jobs have gotten really too complex for humans. There's so many permutations. I just look at us at Vanta. We support well over 20 standard customized frameworks. We've got another dozen products. We got over 200 different integrations we can make with backend systems. Just do the math of that permutation. 20 plus times another 20 or 30 times 200. The permutations of all the combinations our customers could have is mind-boggling. That's way beyond what any single CSM human could actually then interpret what's the exact thing you need as a customer. So maybe the second part of your questionnaire was, how are we using it in CS? We're still experimenting with what's the best way for us to leverage AI really to have the greatest potential for having a positive impact on our customers. And part of that is that, how do I narrow down all those crazy permutations of, you have this group of integrations, you have this group of security standards, you have these controls you're struggling with. How do I mix all that together to give you a cohesively small set of do these 5 recommendations first. So we're trying to use AI to go through all of that so I don't have to rely on humans doing it because we humans end up being slow and inefficient and having to think through those things. Let's pull that information together. And we're also, we've issued a lot of guidance and have some info out on our websites too of how do customers start thinking safely and securely about AI to know that they're not putting stuff out there. Having a private language model, so-called LLMs, learning language models, that's the brains behind AI. How do you have that so you can control that universe of your data, your secret sauce that you're putting in there to learn from and leverage? I think there is that real fear that there's going to be this runaway AI on it. I think for everyone who's been dabbled with it a bit, you'll see it's kind of garbage in, garbage out, depending on the sources that are put into that language model. You may get good answers back. You may get really bad answers back. And how do you tell the difference? So we're approaching it. It definitely has a place. We're looking to add it in so we can get better answers for our customers. And we keep giving guidance to our customers of how to do that safely.
I'm a big believer that usually the biggest learnings or the most important learnings came through failure or through the mistakes that we made. So I have to ask you, what's the not necessarily latest or the biggest mistake you've made in your CS role that actually turned into a valuable learning experience?
Oh God, we all make mistakes all the time, right? We don't have to go back. It could be latest. They queue up easily. Probably the more impactful mistakes, let's call it that. Number one is probably not fully coordinating the customer story and our messaging with the customer journey. There's a lot of times I've seen where we're telling the customer one thing, they're clearly at a different point in their journey with your product and they don't understand it. And it becomes noise and they almost ignore it or discount you, or worst case, you lose some credibility. And we don't recognize the disconnects. We're not looking, we all too often, way too many at technology companies, we look at what I call inside out. We're looking from our vantage point inside the company of what we see. And we're not looking at ourselves objectively from outside to say, how did this really look to the customer? So I think that's one I always take away of have we looked at what we look at from the outside? I'll admit, I always do the secret shopper thing of signing up for all my company's communications somewhere on a separate email address so I can actually see how good or bad we look on those things. That's someone please steal that technique. That always has helped me come back and say, why are we sending this? Because it's a big disconnect that will hurt you overall. Maybe not in one fell swoop, but we'll get there. Other learnings that have been impactful, really reinforcing when we dive in to say, how do we get customers up to speed? How do we get customers educated on our products? All too often, we've all defaulted to just set up a call. I'll go help you with it. And we get into these very inefficient, very non-standard one-on-one type sessions. That really, I think, always undermines the CS team because in a way, you're training the customer to not engage with all that other great material you've already built and put out there. All those standard structured ways to teach someone how to do things that, again, we invested all that time and effort in, and now we're not leveraging. And all those really smart trainers and educators, we're not leveraging their expertise. So how do we make sure we're doing that? I think probably the other big takeaway I always learn from is not giving enough or recognizing that you need to have some lead time when you're starting to deal cross-functionally. In your own CS department, you can easily rally the troops and respond to something quickly. And from minutes to hours to days, really get a new solution or a patch or a fix in place for something that's broken. When you're dealing cross-functionally and even sometimes outside the organization cross-functioning with partners or other suppliers, you need some better lead times. And if you don't recognize that problem, define the problem early enough and a plan with where you need help, it's going to take you way too long and you won't be able to get that solution to the customer. So you'll struggle.
As we wrap up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the future. What are your predictions for the customer success industry in 2024? Are there any trends or changes you foresee that we should all be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I do think the highest level customer success is still maturing as a discipline. Remember, as you pointed out at the beginning of this session, right? maybe 10 years old as a discipline, right? So we're still maturing. Maybe at times it's still more art than science, right? I'd encourage everyone, look for ways you can make it more of that repeatable science, that structured process for things. There's a lot of great learnings out there from a lot of great leaders. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Someone's already solved the problem. It's just a matter of researching it to see what could work for you. I do think, especially with some areas of the world in different economic conditions and struggling in some areas, time to first value is critical. How do you really make that your priority on your roadmap so that customer sees that value? You may not even have to fully deliver that value up front, but if you can get the customer recognizing they're on at least the path to value, not only will they continue to engage with you, they may even be open to expansion, right? Always focus on value from it. And I think the other trend, if you want to call it, and I mentioned a little bit earlier with some of the communications, but I have my marketing colleagues all going, oh, account-based marketing, ABM, this is what we're doing. We're going to get really tailored, really specific. We've got better data now. We can really target potential prospects. I would argue, don't forget about that for your customers, right? If we can standardize, and not just standardize the answers and the approach, but to do that with some personalization, not send that, dear customer, here's the blah, blah, blah thing that's changed, but actually have some level of context. Maybe we'll need AI to help us do that at scale, but I do see that as being a really big thing for both having value in any of those types of communications or engagement, and especially given that there's going to be some new spam and email rules that are going to put some barriers in front of us in 2024. So how do we make sure we've got good, efficient messaging going that's relevant and that can not end up seeing as spam and get rejected so we can't even get our message through? But I think those are the big three that I could see.
Michael, thank you very much for your time and for the opportunity to talk to you today, and happy Thanksgiving.
Irina, thank you so much for the time. What a great conversation here, and certainly hope everyone gets value out of it. Enjoy.